Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to the 7th episode of Paul Heyman's TNA 2010. The key takeaway from last week's episode was, of course, Desmond Wolfe becoming the #1 contender. He will face AJ Styles at Against All Odds for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. That show will be 3 nights after this current episode that I'm booking airs, so this is the go-home show for our second pay-per-view of the Paul Heyman era. I think Genesis went really well with that Kurt Angle AJ Styles main event, so hopefully Wolfe can up his game and maybe reach those levels. I don't think the show will be as good, but of course the key to this episode is trying to get heat on all those storylines, trying to make sure that we have the best possible chance of bringing in a good buy rate, because that is a huge part of our finances, and just in general putting on a good show. We are back in the Impact Zone, and I do think that this is going to be another good episode of Impact. And we begin as usual with a look back at last week's show. Always just want to recap what happened. As we saw in the main event, Desmond Wolfe pinned Samoa Joe thanks to the involvement of Daniels and Kazarian, who continue to try and make Samoa Joe's life hell. Wolfe becomes the #1 contender to the World Heavyweight Championship, as I just said. Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson were also involved in that match, but brawled away. They were sort of so involved in each other personally that it detracted from their opportunity to become the #1 contender. Desmond Wolfe will now face AJ Styles in the main event of this Sunday's Against All Odds. But before then, the champion will be in action, teaming with Amazing Red and Samoa Joe, the X Division champion and Joe, to face the team of Daniels, Kazarian and Tomko in tonight's main event. We then get the opening segment of Desmond Wolfe coming down to the ring, hot off his victory last week to become the #1 contender, and he cuts a promo about his fast rise to the top of TNA. He says that when he showed up in October, he told everybody what he was going to do, and he did exactly that. Wolfe says that everybody's talking about AJ beating Kurt Genesis, but Wolfe has 4 falls over Kurt Angle in his first 6 months in the company, and it will only take 1 fall for him to become the TNA World Heavyweight Champion this Sunday. AJ Styles then comes out, and while he struggled when going off script, Wolfe doing well, improvising, but AJ Styles does tend to be a little bit hit and miss on promos, which again I think is a fair representation within the mod. He comes out, AJ Styles, and says that Wolfe is right, but getting that fall is not going to be easy. Styles says that the World Heavyweight title means so much to him, and Wolfe is going to have to pry it out of his dead, cold hands. Wolfe says that's not going to be a problem, reiterating that he will do whatever it takes to become the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. The two then go face to face. Wolfe tells AJ that he will see him after tonight's main event. AJ is then left in the ring as Wolfe heads to the back, so a decent segment. It could have been better, as I said, with AJ Styles doing better when going off script, but I don't think it's hurt the storyline any, and it's just getting them both in the ring together, face to face, champion and challenger. Got the crowd hot, so a successful segment, not as good as it could have been, but decent nonetheless. As we go into the #1 contendership match, the winner of this match will face the Motor City Machine Guns at Against All Odds for the TNA World Tag Team Championships, and this match was just made. All 3 of them picked up decent wins in the last couple of weeks, so we put those 3 against each other, and it is actually Hernandez and Matt Morgan who defeat Lethal Consequences in 12 minutes and 39. It's again a decent opening match, nothing fantastic, and some good in-ring performances there. Again, Austin Creed, we do need to see him built up a little bit more, and certainly losing matches isn't going to help that, but I felt like Morgan and Hernandez were the right challengers at this time. Lethal Consequences will probably eventually go on to get shots at the tag team titles, but at this moment I feel Hernandez and Morgan are good. I don't want to say that it's a filler feud for Motor City Machine Guns or a filler match at this pay-per-view, because that kind of hints at which way the match is going to go, but I think in continuing to try and get the Motor City Machine Guns over, we can really do something good with the idea that they've got to overcome a very different challenge. They've beat the Hooligans, they've faced teams like Lethal Consequences and Generation Me before, but Hernandez and Matt Morgan pose a very different challenge to them, and that's going to be what we're trying to get over for that match this Sunday. So we need to also set Jay Lethal's new gimmick. I forgot to do that. It's taken me a few weeks to get that. I've set him as Fan Zone because I remember him doing some promos probably around this time in reality, maybe just a little bit later in the year, where he was showing about how he'd been a big fan growing up. So I thought we'd play into that a little bit. Gets a great rating, so that's good. Not suitable for a heel, so yeah. Obviously, Jay Lethal's not going to be heel, at least for the time being. A successful gimmick change there, so that is a very good sign for Jay Lethal going forward. Morgan and Hernandez celebrate in the ring. They will face the Motor City Machine Guns, as I already said. We then get Tara interviewed ahead of the second match of the night, and she officially confirms that she'll be defending the Knockouts Championship in a three-way match against all odds. She says that she's had issues with both ODB and Angelina Love in recent weeks and months, so she is keeping out of this one tonight. No matter what happens, she is not going to get involved. She's just focused on Sunday, where she will see both ODB and Angelina Love. ODB actually wins the match over Angelina Love in 7 minutes and 29 by disqualification, neither of them coming out looking particularly bad. Velvet Sky ran in, Madison Rayne ran in, Lacey Von Erich ran in, as ODB was seemingly closing in on the victory. Again, we've kind of aborted the ODB heel turn. We had been building it up, and it's still actually in the works just in case we want to still do it at the moment, just because of the dominance of the beautiful people. And we've got a few other, they're pretty much all of the heel side of the roster, so maybe we still do need another heel in the Knockouts division. But for the time being, ODB is very much treading the line. She's not a friend of Tara by any means, but she's certainly not in the good books of the beautiful people. And likewise, two decent performances. Again, Angelina Love is a little bit better than ODB, gaining heat to the storyline though, so that's a good thing. And they have good chemistry, which means we get a 63 rating match, which is, really good. Happy with that. And we are going to continue without addressing that because, like I said, ODB is not going heel just yet. After the group take out ODB to cause the DQ, they then throw to the outside. Angelina Love taking a microphone because she has something to say. Love begins by promoting the Knockouts title match against all odds. She's going to take the title, of course, but eventually she turns on her beautiful people teammates. She tells them how important this pay-per-view is, and particularly her match, but she expects all the gold to come back to the beautiful people. That said, the Knockouts title is the priority. While Madison and Velvet have the Knockouts Tag Team Championships match to focus on against Awesome Kong and Hamada, which is a big challenge for them, Lacey Von Erich has no excuse. She then shows her power over the rest of the group by singling out Lacey. She's bullying her a little bit. She says that if they don't get the job done this Sunday, whether that's her against ODB and Tara, and Velvet Sky and Madison Rayne over Awesome Kong and Hamada, she will hold Lacey personally responsible. Von Erich is clearly afraid of Angelina Love. She's avoiding eye contact with the leader of the group. They all head to the back together. Angelina Love doing well, improvising and getting better at her gimmick, which is good to see because it did get a poor rating, I think, initially. Fortunately, it does lose heat to the storyline, losing the gain that we just got with a 45 rated segment. But again, we're putting over that Angelina Love is back, and she is kind of positioning herself as the leader of the beautiful people again, despite missing 3 or 4 months of action. And particularly, she's not fond of Lacey Von Erich, and all the pressure on Von Erich to deliver this Sunday. As we go into the locker room to further promote that main event that we announced earlier, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe and Amazing Red are discussing the upcoming main event and talking about their individual issues. They will face Daniels, Kazarian and Tomko, as I said. Within the discussion, talk turns to Tracy Brooks' challenge to Amazing Red last week. Joe asks if Red has accepted the challenge, but he says that he doesn't know what to do. He can't sign something without knowing anything else about the match, particularly when he doesn't even know his opponent. Red asks Joe about Homicide and his scheduled match with him. Hopefully it doesn't come across too forced in, but we're also putting across that Joe and Homicide will team against Daniels and Tomko against all odds. Joe says though that he hasn't heard from Homicide all week and he doesn't know what's going on with that guy. He's a loose cannon, he does his own thing. He's just got to hope that he shows up on Sunday. The only one of them who seems certain of anything is AJ Styles, who is wholly focused on tonight's main event. He says that they've all got to focus on dealing with Daniels, Kazarian and Tomko, and then they can focus on against all odds. So AJ Styles very much putting over that he is always focused on the task at hand. We had him say this before the last pay-per-view as well when he was facing Daniels. He's not getting ahead of anyone. He takes every match just as serious as the next. It's part of his character. I'm not sure how I'd describe it. I think there is actually a attribute in there. I don't know if he has it, but that's almost what I'd translate it to. I don't know if it's dynamo. Like, he's always giving his best. He always wants to steal the show, and he always thinks that this next match is the most important. AJ improvised well, unlike earlier, so he's getting his point across well in this one. While Amazing Red was absolutely awful, his improvised dialogue was a complete disaster. Again, unsurprising, Red isn't a promo guy at all, and again, another thing to take note of, Amazing Red scripts him in the future. We then get word from Homicide. Joe may not have heard from him, but he has done some sort of promo for TNA Impact. The loose cannon is in a dark room watching footage of D'Angelo Dineiro's various vignettes from recent weeks, and he's just furious. Just even watching D'Angelo Dinero has got him into a crazed frenzy of anger. Homicide then turns to the camera and says that every word that comes out of that man's mouth is bullshit. He calls out the Pope on claiming the streets when he's never even seen them before these phony staged promo videos were made. D'Angelo Dinero isn't from the streets of Harlem, and he tells him that he's got until next week to tell the truth to the world, or Homicide is going to expose him for the fake that he is. So, revealing a little bit more of why Homicide attacked D'Angelo Dinero, his feeling is that D'Angelo Dinero has no connection to the streets that he's claiming. He's billed from the streets of Harlem. Homicide contesting that. Whether Pope will have a reasonable explanation or whether Homicide is right, we'll see. Again, that's why I said a few episodes back that this was a sort of shades of grey storyline, because you could say that Homicide is right about Pope sort of taking advantage of a situation that he maybe wasn't in, but possibly Pope's in the right and he's telling the truth, and Homicide has just completely got the wrong end of the stick and is misinformed. But it's a really good promo from Homicide there at 63. Didn't expect to get a segment that rating with Homicide involved, and after the poor start to that storyline last week, it's good to see it gain heat from a Homicide promo, and over the next few weeks it's going to hopefully heat up even more. We know if Pope does a promo back at Homicide, that should get a good rating. So I'm optimistic now after a disappointing start. This is a really bad match. I know it's just a glorified squash. It's only 5 minutes, and Generation Me convincingly defeat Kiyoshi and Sheikh Abdul-Bashir, who have been jobbers since this save started. It's actually not too bad performances, so I'm not 100% sure what went wrong with it. Inconsistency, poor momentum, lack associated storyline. I suppose it's just lots of different little things, and the fact that it's a squash match and none of the guys are that over. So pretty straightforward why that didn't get a good rating. As Generation Me celebrate picking up another win in TNA, Paul London and Brian Kendrick come to the top of the ramp. They patronisingly offer their congratulations to Nick and Matt Jackson, saying that they're building quite a little buzz for themselves in the Impact Zone. It's nice for these unknowns to get a little bit of attention, and these fans clearly like what they're seeing. The Hooligans then challenge these two young bucks to teach them a lesson this Sunday. After all, they already know everything there is to know in this business. That's why they didn't want the advice of two veterans like London and Kendrick. Nick and Matt Jackson are more than happy to face them, as another match is confirmed for the Against All Odds card. That brings an end to the first hour of the show, with another decent segment, adding heat to the storyline, and Kendrick doing well improvising and getting better at his gimmick, and that is a pretty good way to end the first hour. The second hour begins with a even better segment, a good promo, Anderson improvising well. He's really one of the strongest guys on the microphone, so it's no surprise there. And he begins to cut an obnoxious promo talking about his match with Kurt Angle on Sunday. He's just winding people up. He's really leaning into the fact now that we have turned him heel. Well, he was always a heel, but we were presenting him as a face character initially. But now he's really just trying to get under the skin of the fans and of Kurt Angle. But before he faces Kurt Angle, he made a challenge to anybody in the back who truly represents what the new TNA is all about. Not a washed up has-been like Kurt, whose best days are behind him, but a hungry and aggressive talent, the type that Paul Heyman has been crying out for. Mr. Anderson's one of them, but he has also found the perfect opponent for him in the locker room. After all, who's more hungry and aggressive than a shark? It is Shark Boy who returns to face Mr. Anderson. Anderson's built this up only to give us Shark Boy, as popular as he was as of a jobber figure. I think that would be another sort of string to his heel bow, in that he built up this big opponent only for it to be Shark Boy who he beats in 2 minutes. A decent performance from Anderson, so I think it's going to be considering it's a 2-minute match, that's a really good performance, I think. And also his match against Angle, I think, is possibly going to be the best on the card. Any match with Kurt Angle has the chance of being the best on the card, but Anderson has impressed me with his in-ring work as well as his promo since he came to the company. The Forget About It storyline advancing after the match as well, as Anderson places his foot on the chest of his defeated opponent. Kurt Angle comes out from the back, and he's not here for a discussion. He doesn't want to talk with Mr. Anderson. He wants a fight. Anderson leaves the ring as Kurt enters, but he's not getting away. Angle pursues him, and the two begin to brawl on the outside of the ring. Eventually, they brawl up the ramp, down the side of the ramp, and referees and staff members have to come out to split them up. And while they do so, the sheer numbers keeping the two men apart, the commentators put over their match this Sunday, which might just be the most heated and physical on the card. I think there's more we can do with this storyline. There's plenty of time to flesh it out, and I think it will go to a second or maybe a third pay-per-view, because again, I think they can have really good matches. Just they're angry at each other at the minute. I think we can put a little bit more depth into it as we go to the Destination X pay-per-view, but for now I do think there's a little bit of heat behind it, and I do think it's going to, like I said, deliver on that show. Following his interview last week with Lauren Brooke, Jimmy Jacobs has this time been chosen as the guy to sit down with Mike Tenay. Tenay does his sit-down interviews pretty much every week, maybe once every 2 weeks sometimes, and the professor wants more answers from Jimmy Jacobs about this new age that he keeps talking about. Is it a stable? Is it a slogan? What actually is the new age? Jimmy Jacobs explains that there has been a status quo in wrestling for as long as he can remember. The shaking of hands, the carrying of bags, the paying of the dues. Jacobs says that the world is changing and wrestling will be forced to change too. Those boxes, those 3 or 4 molds of what a main event pro wrestling superstar is, we are going to break out of it. The new age is well and truly upon us, and a visionary like Jimmy Jacobs saw that the future is now here in TNA. That's why he is accelerating the process. The seed has been sown, the movement will grow, and the fruits of our labour will be bountiful. So TNA's not really getting any answers from Jimmy Jacobs is a takeaway from that. We're getting the general, his sort of philosophy on wrestling, but he's not really explaining what the new age is or will be. But obviously, Jimmy Jacobs, cryptic in his promos, improvising well. A 44 rating segment is a little bit better. Encouraging signs considering the last few weeks haven't been very good for Jimmy Jacobs. The storyline advancing and gaining heat. We then go into another interview, but this is the Pope being interviewed by JB in the back. D'Angelo De Niro is asked for his response to Homicide's words from earlier. The Pope tells JB that he's got nothing to hide, and if Homicide was here tonight in the building, he'd show him that. He'd go right to the ring and call Homicide out for a fight, but he isn't here. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody knows what's going on in this maniac's mind, so instead Pope has a challenge for him. He's going to let Homicide and Joe deal with what they've got to deal with against all odds. But next week on Impact, he's calling out Homicide again, and he expects him to be here. I could have possibly put this on Against All Odds, but I think the storyline needs a little bit more time to cook, and I think it'll be a good match to put on Impact, maybe make it onto the next pay-per-view card, but for now, I think we definitely need to go more in depth with what the issues are between them before we put it on pay-per-view. And we already had a pretty stacked card, Homicide booked in another match, although that could have been changed. But I thought it was better now to stick with the storylines that have been built a little bit more, a little bit longer term, and then see how this storyline develops and if it needs to be held off for the next pay-per-view or whether we can just put it on an episode of Impact and it be one of the key matches on that night, but not necessarily ever make it to a pay-per-view. We then get the 5th match of the night, and it had a decent reaction but subpar wrestling as Taylor Wilde and Sarita, the former Knockouts Tag Team Champions, defeated Alyssa Flash and Daphne. We wanted to get the former champions on the card just because they're not on the pay-per-view. Awesome Kong and Hamada have moved on to another challenge, so we want to keep these two relevant. And Flash and Daphne, despite a win for Flash recently, Daphne was the weak link in terms of the story this match. She also was in terms of the rating. It's a good match though, a 55, and the story after the match isn't about Sarita and Taylor Wilde. They've just picked up a win and gone. But the focus post-match is on an argument between Daphne and Alyssa Flash heading up the ramp. This is just a way to protect Flash in a defeat in a way. She's berating Daphne, blaming her for the loss, and says that if they're going to continue to work together, Alyssa Flash is going to have to be the leader, and Daphne is going to have to follow her lead. So I'm more interested in Alyssa Flash as a singles competitor. I was trying to find a good tag team partner for her. I do think I'd probably need a few more people in the Knockouts division, so I'd be happy to hear some suggestions or anything like that. Daphne, I'm not sure what her situation was too much at this time. I should probably look into this. I know that she wasn't wrestling much. I know she was wrestling every now and again, but not much at all. And I don't know if that was a physical thing or whether just the bookers wanted to transition her into being a manager. So I will definitely have to look into that more. Cutting to the back, Tracy Brooks is then seen with a clipboard and a contract. And she is addressing the camera, but specifically Amazing Red. And she says that this copy of the contract has been signed and Paul Heyman has ratified the challenge for Against All Odds. Now it's completely down to Amazing Red to sign that contract, and she's going to allow him an extension. He has until this Sunday to make his decision. She will be there at Against All Odds. The man behind this challenge will be there at Against All Odds, and if he chooses not to defend his title, then like she said, things will have to be done the hard way. So while it does lose heat to the storyline, the segment last week must have been better. I am actually quite impressed with the Tracy Brooks segment getting a 50 a promo. She's not been pushed or positioned that well yet, and she's going to be a manager of this new person, or she's going to be the new manager of this person, so her getting a 50 promo is definitely a good sign. As Paul Heyman comes down to the ring, I said that I didn't want to use him in ring too much. I didn't want him to be a major part of the on-screen product, but There's so much to address before the pay-per-view that he decided the easiest way was to come to the ring, talk to the fans. He wanted to get some feedback, and he wants to put over the main event. Amazing Red, AJ Styles and Samoa Joe facing Kazarian, Tomko and Daniels, but also he runs through the card of Against All Odds. Paul Heyman, like I've said, he is the ultimate hype man, and he's all about selling the pay-per-view to the fans. So this might become a common thing on go-home shows because nobody can sell a pay-per-view quite like Paul Heyman. He then turns his attention, though, to other things that he's had a lot of questions about, and Paul Heyman confirms that Bobby Lashley has officially agreed a new deal with TNA, a restructured schedule and a specific clause that for now will stay between Heyman, Dixie Carter and Bobby Lashley. When that information is relevant and affects the fans in any way, he promises that they will be completely transparent and everything will be laid out on the table. He also talks about Team 3D, Rhino and Mick Foley, anybody else who feels they have been left out in the cold by his arrival. Heyman says that as of tonight, he is officially welcoming them all back into the fold. He's had to think about it, and since they all have valid TNA contracts, they're going to get paid, so he might as well give them a chance to prove their worth. Over the next few weeks, those guys will be reintroduced in one way or another, and after Against All Odds, he agrees that he will address any and all of those workers' concerns. But before then, we do have that pay-per-view, and he ends the promo, which is a good promo. Might have expected a little bit better from Paul Heyman if we're honest, but he improvised well, gained heat to a couple of storylines, so I'm not going to complain about anything there. The end message of his promo, despite addressing those things, is another hard sell of the pay-per-view. The main event, Amazing Red, AJ Styles and Samoa Joe defeating Daniels, Kazarian and Tomko clean when AJ pins Tomko with a Styles Clash. We had quite a lot of outside interference and dodgy finishes in recent weeks, so I thought it was important going into the pay-per-view to have a clean finish for the main event. AJ Styles head and shoulders above everybody else, so the right choice to be the one to get the fall. Tomko the weak link, so again the right choice to. It's a 74 rated match, so as we can see, the performances of AJ Styles, Daniels and Samoa Joe particularly dragging that up to a main event level performance. Only the announcing as a negative really, gaining heat to storylines, getting the crowd buzzing. So a very, very good main event as we go into the go home segment for TNA Against All Odds 2010, and AJ Styles is with his partners celebrating the victory. As he said, he only focuses on one match at a time, so they're standing tall, shaking hands with their partners, happy with the work that they've done together. While this is happening, they fail to notice that Desmond Wolfe had made his way out from the back and grabbed AJ's World Heavyweight Championship that had been with the timekeeper's table. Wolfe then retreated back to the top of the ramp with a microphone in his hand. He called AJ's attention to him. Wolfe told AJ not to move because he was going to give him a preview of the final image at the end of Sunday's pay-per-view. He then raised the title above his head and said that it's taken him less than 6 months to do what AJ could only do last year after being with the company for over 7 years. Desmond Wolfe is levels above AJ Styles, and this Sunday Against All Odds, we're going to have a new TNA World Heavyweight Champion. Styles is understandably pissed off, and this is only made worse when Wolfe throws the championship down, showing a complete lack of respect and a complete disregard to the physical title itself. Mauro and Taz then sign off the show as Wolfe storms off to the back. AJ's pissed off, and the commentators say that things are getting all the more heated ahead of this Sunday's main event match between AJ Styles and Desmond Wolfe Against All Odds. So we're sort of putting over there the symbol of Wolfe throwing down the title isn't that he doesn't care about the title or that he's disrespecting it, but more that the title in terms of being known as the world champion is more important than the physical belt to him. It's all about what it's been from day one since he came to TNA, being recognised as the best wrestler in the world. He's a very obsessive character sort of developed over the few months. He was obsessive in trying to prove that he was better than the greatest wrestler in the world. He's now obsessed with trying to prove that he is better than the world heavyweight champion. AJ beat Kurt at Genesis and Wolfe's focus sort of immediately switched to him. So Wolfe very, very much desperate to become the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. And I think if he can continue to do good promos like that, if we can get his in-ring work up just a little bit, and I think that's more to do with his overness than his actual ability, he's definitely somebody who could be considered as one of the next World Heavyweight Champions. We've got a very, very strong pay-per-view card. Again, I think a good show here, 63, increasing our popularity in 30 regions. Would have probably hoped for better in the go-home show, as you do, but I think we've done a good job of building to the pay-per-view. We've got AJ versus Desmond Wolfe. We've got Kurt Angle versus Mr. Anderson, probably as the two marquee singles matches. but there's plenty of other stuff like that. No emails, no decisions, nothing really to know after the show. We get underwhelming though, apparently. But that pay-per-view coming very, very soon, and then after that we've got a couple of debuts on the shows after, so still exciting times. The momentum still moving forward, and I still feel like every show is pretty important at this point. Against all odds, of course, a priority, and hopefully we can deliver with that. And I'll probably put the card on the screen now to end the episode.